Kiersten, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you for being a guest on my fake show. Because I really don't have a show. But I thought it would be fun if we talked a little bit about how we know each other, what we're doing together, what we've done in the past, and what we're doing together now. But before I dive into that, I wanted to just talk a little bit about who you are. So I'm going to read your bio really quickly. Mark Pucci is a highly decorated retired NYPD detective. Mark's investigative experience while working for the NYPD encompassed all facets of law enforcement, from vice, narcotics, illegal firearms, gangs, and other violent crime-related investigations, to Special Operations Division, citywide major crime pattern identification, and the apprehension of many of the city's most wanted criminals. Many of the cases Mark has worked on have received international and national press coverage. In 2013, he founded his own private investigative firm, and in 2021, founded the National Institute for Law and Justice 501c3. Now we're going to talk about that NILJ, which is beautifully featured behind you, in just a minute. But did I miss anything in your bio?
No.
Okay.
No.
You were busy.
Pretty exhaustive. Yeah.
You're a busy guy. That's a lot of stuff to do. That's a lot. And thank you for your service all of these years and for what you've done. I wanted to talk, first of all, about the fact that you wrote the foreword for this little doozy of a book that I wrote that's coming out on September 20th. And I couldn't be more grateful for that. And it's based off of us working together and knowing each other for the past 8 years. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But definitely pick it up. He wrote an amazing foreword. I'm very grateful. So when you read Little Voices, don't skip the foreword. Read that. It's really good. So let's just sort of go back in time a little bit and talk about, how we met, what you think of psychic medium information in general. And we'll start there.
Okay. Well, first, I want to say that it was my honor that you asked me to write the foreword. I couldn't have been, more happy to do that. And obviously everything that I wrote in there was heartfelt and 100% the absolute truth about how I felt and feel.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. That means a lot. It means so much to me. So let's talk about how we met. And you go first, and then I'll jump in because I know I was introduced to that case in a different way.
Yeah. So, in all honesty, and not so oddly, I was actually referred to what we can now, say because of our investigation, unfortunately, the widow. At the time, she was the wife of the, of the missing male, through another medium. Who's located out on the east end of Long Island, and had suggested to her that she might want to, just speak to me, and have me, maybe just do a cursory review of what had been done up to that point, and possibly determine things that may not have been done, or if they weren't done, to the fullest extent, or maybe not at all. So that's how I came into the case. Originally.
So I came into the case referred by a friend of the wife. So it's interesting. And it was 2013, I think, at the time, or late 2013, 2004, early 2014. And I remember I had just come out publicly about having these intuitive gifts. I had been working on cases with other detectives around the country for about 2 years, but I didn't want to talk about it because naturally it makes you, put you in a different category. Yeah. I didn't want it to hurt my business or my family. And so it really took a lot of time thinking about how I was going to do that. But it was because of that post and because I was becoming vocal that my friend reached out and said, could you possibly check into this? My friend's husband is missing. So that's how we got involved, or that's how we got on the case. And then she did mention to me, hey, listen, there's a detective who has volunteered to work on this case as well. And I'd love for you. He's willing to talk to you. And I thought, well, that's amazing because that's kind of rare. It's not it's not that
It's
often
not.
that you find law enforcement officers that believe or openly talk about believing in intuition. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So very similarly to what you just described, to actually, let's say openly or somewhat openly, speak about it is quite a leap. Not Probably not quite as much of a leap as you made,
Mm.
um, you know, which is it's very, very commendable and very courageous initially, and so through the years, of course, the more like skeptical or more stoic, old school mentality, detectives, may never accept it. But in the scheme of things, I've come to find that, and as we discussed, recently, uh, psychics or mediums, information is no different than any other, type of, you know, uh, say a secondary witness, you know, if you had a call line, a tip line, or anything else, because at the end of the day, as a detective, my job is to, receive, information, and then thoroughly investigate it and vet it. And then if it becomes a part of the reality of the case, then it doesn't really matter where it came from, you know, because it's all the same thing. As we would say, it all goes in the same bucket at the end. Um, but the difference is, in my experience in working with mediums, there's a select few, you being at the top of the list. Um, the information is generally, is highly specific and can immediately be, addressed and vetted, as I just mentioned, and many times it creates an additional, connective, a connective, say, arm of, or branch of the investigation, or in some cases can create what I would call a fork in the road, which is another avenue to explore that may not have been apparent just from, what your normal garden variety, of information that
Mhm.
would come in would provide. So I
It's
found it very, 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 very advantageous.
That's wonderful. Thank you for explaining that. I agree. I mean, I think it's really interesting um, when we've worked together and things have popped up. And I mean, I'm very clear, right? There's sometimes when we don't, I'll get information that won't be used until a year down the road, or that won't even present itself. And I find that when I work with grieving parents as well, because I mostly, as you know, channel children who have passed on, sometimes they're giving information that is for the future, and you can look back and say, oh my gosh, wait, that's where this comes in, and initially you might think, I don't know where this fits. But it's so amazing to me that you are open to this, and that you have been open to this throughout, hopefully throughout your career. Maybe it's just been
Yeah.
the last few years, I'm not sure. But I think that's such a gift. And I know that there are other detectives who absolutely are open and absolutely do believe, and I know several of them that I work with. However, I should say they're not open to being public about it, and I understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that. So I commend you for being open about the fact that you value this type of information. So let's dive into the case a little bit. I know I'm just going to throw it out there that some of these cases we work on have some privacy issues,
Yes.
and so we have to be kind of careful about how much detail we give. And so I just wanted to let you kind of take the lead on that, and we can talk a little bit about that first missing persons case we worked on.
Okay. So and in that spirit, some, let's say, phraseologies that I may
Mhm.
use will be, very general but
Mhm.
transparent in, the listener's interpretation
Yeah.
of what I might actually mean by
Mhm.
saying it.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be too hard to figure out. But I never said it directly. So,
Okay. Good job.
um, yeah. So, in the particular case where we first met each other, as we had said before, we were both, referred by, secondary outside,
Mhm.
mutual acquaintances. So, I had probably been involved in the case for probably 7 or 8 months at that point. And when it comes to, cases of this nature, I always do a very, very thorough cursory review of what's available, what has been done prior, because in some instances, unfortunately, there isn't, anything that could be viable
Mhm.
where I could really, and my involvement is going to make any kind of a forward motion, or, or an additional, source of information or possible closure. So, we always do that first because, first and foremost, the emotional, stability of the loved ones is already so tenuous because of just the situation itself. The last thing you want to do is provide any sort of, possible false hope, or, any kind of advisement where the conclusion that maybe has already been made, whether
Mhm.
it's by a police agency, or or other, may change, that you may be able to move the needle.
Yeah.
So, first and foremost, I'm always very, very cautious. I mean, some of the more intricate cases, I may take up to a month before I'll commit, or possibly commit, I should say, back to the family, and say, you know what, I think there's something here. I truly believe, what you're saying.
Mhm.
And I really, think that, with the proper, time and resources, that we can really, really, find out what happened here,
Mhm.
put together the pieces. So, with that being said, in this particular, initial case,
Mhm.
the gentleman had, vanished, after being at work. The police initial involvement had, established there was some, very superficial, CCTV video from a neighbor's house that captured him, coming home, in the, late afternoon, and then leaving 15 minutes or later. You could just see that he was alone in his car,
Mhm.
but you couldn't, by the angle of the camera and the quality of the video, you couldn't really discern much more. A further investigation of what was found, that he had left behind at the house, showed that he had gone to one other, commercial establishment by a receipt.
Mhm.
And with that receipt, um, you know, they were able to go and obtain the, CCTV video from
Mhm.
that location, and see that he was there at a specific time as well, which was just prior to him, entering and then exiting his house, and then never being seen again.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was basically all that was, say, concrete. And then the rest of the investigation, like many other
Mhm.
investigations, was just trying to put together, phone logs, text
Mhm.
messages, possibly, emails, but not so much, in this case. And then just traditional boots on the ground,
Yeah.
canvassing, identified
Mhm.
witnesses, friends, coworkers, and things of that nature. So when I came into it, the the county police homicide unit had pretty much, um, all but closed their investigation. And what caused me to engage was, after exhaustive review of what had been done.
Mhm.
I had almost a matching exhaustive list of things that had not been done,
Oh, wow.
and that the conclusions were not. I, I didn't feel were 100% in line
Mhm.
with what the possible, conclusion of this might be after a full and more thorough investigation.
Okay.
So, when I engaged, I again did a lot of boots on the ground, interviewing, friends, family, coworkers, reviewing, all available media and things of that
Mhm.
nature. and started to kind of hone in onto what I felt was the base of the direction that this was, because when you follow the facts like that, it
Hmm.
almost pulls you along,
That's, yeah,
because because you're finding almost like a railroad
yeah,
track, what once you're on that track, then it just kind of moves
yeah.
forward. And that's about the time that the now widow
Uh-huh.
had approached me, as you mentioned before, and said, hey, a friend of a friend
Hmm.
is a medium, and she's offering to help
Hmm.
pro bono,
Yeah.
just to lend her time, just to help out. Is that somebody you'd be willing to speak to? And without any hesitation, I said, of course,
Thank you.
I would love to speak to her. And then that's when we began to engage
Hmm.
in our conversations.
Yeah, I vaguely remember the conversation on the phone. I more so remember meeting you in person in New York. And what was
Yes.
interesting about it is, I didn't I didn't have much information at all about the case. I knew that that particular person had crossed over. And I knew that because I was receiving information based on, what I know as a medium. And so I just remember how crazy it was. I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona. I was at the time. You were in New York City. And I remember, channeling all this information, putting it in a file folder. And then I think it was May of 2014, we met in New York City because I was there on business. And we
Yes.
sat down in a diner, and I opened up my folder, you opened up your stuff, and we compared notes, and there were a lot of similarities, quite a few similarities, and that's what's so amazing to me, that we could join up that way. We could actually match up in many ways.
Yes.
um and I was so grateful, to be honest with you. It meant the world to me, because even though I had been channeling for a couple of years, and my entire book is about the fact that I got hit over the head with this when I was 36. So this was not something that was in my world prior. I did not believe in mediums or psychics. I just had no, I really had no interest in any of it. And so to have you be, first of all, willing to sit down with me and willing to compare notes, and then start working together from there, it just meant the world. It really was. I'm just so grateful.
Oh no, it
Grateful.
was honestly, it was my pleasure. And just to further and
Hmm.
reiterate what you're saying and confirm, um, and even just to backtrack a little bit,
Yeah.
where I'm always more than willing, if a credible
Hmm.
medium has some sort of an intuition, a feeling,
Hmm.
or specific information that they're getting through messages, I'm more than happy to to speak to them. I said, but at the same time, you know, being a police officer,
Yeah.
detective, private investigator, we by nature are skeptical people, but that also
Hmm.
causes us to be very very what's the word I'm looking for, ex-
Curious.
yeah, well, curious and exhaustive in our
Right.
like our investigative technique. I always use the
Hmm.
phrase, when I'm presented with something, I immediately do a virtual 360-degree analysis around it, looking for all possible points, counterpoints, the ups, the pluses, the
Hmm.
negatives, and everything before I accept anything. So
Right.
with that being said, when and you included, and
Hmm.
no offense, but because this is
Yes.
across the board,
Yeah.
when I speak to or engage with a medium, it's no different than any other person who's a witness or anybody that I think may have information. I'm
Hmm.
basically not going to give you anything,
Right. Right.
because
Hmm.
it's 99% incoming and
Right.
1% outgoing from me. So
Yeah.
to validate what you said, when we met and our prior conversations on the phone,
Hmm.
um, it was more of an acknowledgement if
Hmm.
you were over the target, rather
Yeah.
than me saying, here, let me send you a 10-page document of the summary of my investigation thus far and tell me if you can add anything to it.
Right.
It's the complete opposite of that. I'm by nature, I'm not going to be covetous with that information,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not forthcoming with it either.
Right.
Because to me, the ultimate validation is when you say to me what I already know,
Right.
or
Right.
add to what I've, say come across
Mm-hmm.
or validated, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
adding additional information to that, continuing that vein of the investigation. So
Yeah.
to me, there's no more validation than I'm, literally like the cat with the canary,
Yes.
and you're telling me what the canary looks like.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well,
So yeah,
yes,
it's
I love that. And then I think that'll be interesting for people who are watching, to understand how you operate when you work with any medium or psychic, not just me. But let's
yeah,
talk about that additional information a little bit, because it did play a role in this particular case, and as much as we can discuss it. But there was some additional information. I do remember getting some info on a location, and it was pretty specific. And then I also remember I sometimes will be able to pinpoint, from wherever I am, a specific location. And I think you use some of that in addition to all the boots on the ground stuff that you had already, all the investigative work that you've done, to go out to a specific location one day.
yes. So, that was very, very excellent description. So,
Okay.
I had, again, without revealing, to
Mm-hmm.
you again,
Mm-hmm.
and then not being covetous to a fault,
Yeah.
but let's say deliberately vague.
Yes.
You had, over the course of a couple of conversations, described a geographical location, some
Mm-hmm.
specifics as far as, some topographical
Mm-hmm.
features,
Mm-hmm.
um, a waterway between two bodies of land,
Mm-hmm.
um, bridges in close proximity to each other, but they would actually, be, two different, regions, let's
Mm-hmm.
say by name.
Right.
I remember specifically, things of that nature. Um, and then, the description of, that it was a large, body of water.
Mm-hmm.
The land appeared to end,
Okay.
maybe
Mm-hmm.
creating like a peninsula or
Mm-hmm.
something of that nature. And again, as you had mentioned, so through, my exhaustive interviews, probably in
Mm-hmm.
excess of 100
Wow.
separate interviews over 18 to 20 months, some individuals very, very intimately involved and friendly with
Mm-hmm.
with our victim, and others, which in this case actually proved as valuable, were on the ear witness end of chatter
Mm-hmm.
just prior to and then after his disappearance. So in putting those all together, we always
Mm-hmm.
say as an investigator, you take everything that you've been told, and then
Mm-hmm.
almost like a stencil, you stack everything up on top of the each other, and
Right.
then what is directly in line a lot of times will end up being what the truth is, and then the stuff that's on either the right or the left of it, needs further investigation,
Mm-hmm.
to either rule in or rule out. So many of these interviews were, a lot of that information was aligning, you know,
Yes.
directly, on top of each other.
Okay.
So your description was, to be honest, it was uncanny
Mm-hmm.
as to the topographical features that you were from Flagstaff,
Mm-hmm.
Arizona, having no
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of, let's say
Yeah.
Long Island and
Yeah.
and the southern New York City
Right.
area, um, and and then also, and I know I know that we had discussed this.
Uh-huh.
There was one other feature you mentioned, and and I pretty specifically remember you said, and I don't know what the hell this means, but they're something to do with horses, and I'm saying to myself, I don't know if
Right.
it's a remote enough area. I mean, I know we're in New York or New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess people could, ride horseback through these, rough remote terrain to
Uh-huh.
access a place that you couldn't access on foot or with a vehicle. I'm trying to think, like what could this possibly be? But not to foreshadow, but
Yeah.
I'll get to that in a little while.
Well,
Um,
I want to jump in really quick and just say that it was interesting because Mark's speaking to the fact that there's a journalist doing a story about us and in the book launch and NILJ. And she asked him some questions and it was really cool. He shared those with me, his answers, and it was cool to read back because, to be honest, as a medium, I quite often don't remember unless I, excuse me, unless I write it down what I've channeled, because the messages are coming through me. They're not from me. And so when I read about the horses, I started laughing because I had no memory of that at all. Zero. I don't even know if I've told you that, but yeah, it
yeah,
was cool to read.
yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that too. Some mediums that I have worked with, very reputable as yourself, and are you know uh, really engaged in this. They all have the same experience. It's
Mhm.
own. I mean, that the way it's described, and I don't know personally, but very similar to your description. It's almost like an out of body or let's say more of a subconscious experience.
Yes.
And I'll come back to them as I did with you,
Hmm.
as we discuss these things,
Hmm.
and you'll say, I don't even remember saying that, like
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about. And
Hmm.
it seems to be common, in that
It is.
medium,
Yeah.
that they're literally just channeling. It has
Hmm.
nothing to do with any conscious thought. It's just, it's just coming through.
Yes, exactly. No,
It's a phenomenon.
you
Yeah,
said
it's
that
pretty
very
cool.
well. Yeah, it is pretty
Yeah,
cool. It is. Yeah.
yeah. And
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, that's okay. I was just gonna say, so so you had this information, you went out to this location based off of intuitive information, but also boots on the ground. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
Knowing that we can't share all the detail, but
Yeah.
share some.
So my intention was, again, just like anything else, I'm getting that information, let's say, real world firsthand, statements and recorded
Mm-hmm.
interviews and things. You and I discuss. You then, over the course of several
Mm-hmm.
conversations, give me the information that we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm really, really, I guess the word excited. I don't know how you could be excited to
Yeah,
possibly find someone's remains, but
I know.
in my in my world, there was a certain level of excitement or anticipation that this may be
Mm-hmm.
a pretty big piece of the puzzle. And now it requires me to physically go to that location,
Mm-hmm.
with the intention of really, really doing it, like, as long as it takes. If it takes me 10 hours, it takes me 10 hours. If it takes me,
Mm-hmm.
2 hours, it takes 2 hours. But to exhaustively walk any place that's accessible to me, if possible, from, and if it's, and I know from looking at the Google Earth and just
Mm-hmm.
being familiar with the area, it's a swampy, close to what, there's a little bit of a sandy beach, but it's not in any manner, shape, or form a
Mm-hmm.
public area,
Mm-hmm.
that you would take your kids to go swimming or
Right.
anything. It's a very, very high current area, kind of a shipping lane,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
access point, from, international, shipping. And it's densely, dense vegetation, reeds,
Mm-hmm.
sticker type bushes, and other just, like impenetrable,
Yeah.
vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
But also a place that if you wanted to dispose of a body, a jogger isn't going to happen upon it, on a Thursday
Mm-hmm.
morning. So,
Right.
might be worth, a couple of scratches
Mm-hmm.
and things,
Right.
for those who would need that area. So, um, I and again, I think it's important to say, I didn't say, hey, listen, on Tuesday, I'm going to be going out to that area that you described and that, I have, other information on. So I'll let you know how I'm going to do, I think it's important to say that, it wasn't like a daily update. I wasn't saying, here's my
Yeah.
plans for the week and this is what we're
Right.
going to do,
No.
So, in me, coordinating, and trying to be as efficient as I can, I had picked a certain, like late morning, early afternoon, where I was going to be in an adjacent, area.
Right.
And then I knew that I could clear my schedule and dedicate the rest of the day, or at least, if necessary, until dark,
Right.
to complete this task. So I believe it might have been the day before, or early morning, and you reached out to me and said, listen, I don't know if there's anything to this. I'm really anxious, and I just have this, very, like unexplainable, kind of, fear, that, when and if you engage in that area, that you will literally maybe in, like mortal danger.
Mortal danger. Yeah.
And, I remember, because we really didn't know each other, and you were like, please, please, please,
Yeah.
don't think I'm crazy or whatever, I know you can take care of yourself, you were giving me
Right.
all,
Oh, yeah.
all the normal disclaimers,
Yeah.
and, and everything, and just saying, just please, just promise me that you'll be on a little more of a high alert to the possibility that somebody is watching that area, because our subject may not be alone, and it may be like for lack of a better phrase, like a dumping zone, for them, for this particular group. May use it as a disposal area for multiple past issues, let's just say.
Yes.
So I do remember it was, I'm going to say it was the morning before, or the morning of, and it resonated with me. I said, you know what, there's some validity to this.
Okay,
and
good.
Subconsciously, I'm gonna, and then of course, like anything else, then I went about my daily activities. And so I come upon this, I come upon this area, I park a certain distance away, as normal and customary. I'm not gonna, put my identifying factor with license plates on it, parked right in this area. So I parked a little distance away. I approached into the area, and began to, to do my canvas. And as I was going, I was just, every now and then, if I felt an area was especially, engaging, I would, there happened to be a berm where I could walk up, and gain an elevated position so that I can actually take a, photograph looking downward, and see a little bit deeper past, where all the brush line was, because it was almost as tall as me.
Right.
So as I'm doing this, it's pretty much, it's a public access road, I guess, for anybody that lives anywhere, in a coastal area or by a lake or a river. You'll have, it's more or less a dirt road, and vehicles that, are equipped, so say a 4-wheel drive, a Jeep, or other, can access, like say this sandy, beachy area via this road. So very well traveled, probably in the time that I was there, probably, more than 50 or 60 vehicles.
Wow.
Passed me in both directions, going out, many of them you could see fishing poles or surfboards or other things, protruding from the back of their, SUVs or pickup trucks. So I'm probably about a quarter of the way the distance on this road. And as all these other vehicles are passing by, we're sharing, some sharing pleasantries, good morning, how are you, hi, how are you? So I'm very at ease, and also feeling like, I'm in a good place here, This seems like there's a good possibility,
Yeah.
that we may, with further investigation after analyzing the photographs and other things, that I may want to come back here, possibly even with a dog team, a cadaver dog team, or other, or do some sort of aerial where we can see, where let's say the ground has been disturbed, or other telltale signs of shallow or other burials. So at a point soon after that, a vehicle going by me, and again, I'm not paying 100%. I'm always cognizant, for my safety, but not 100% feeling any kind of threat. And this vehicle slows down and then stops parallel to me. And Reddy had his window down, was his arm kind of, draped over the driver's door. And, he says to me, is everything okay? Are you lost? Do you need help with something? So that seemed odd, just in and of itself, because, a couple of dozen other vehicles had passed by and could care less what I
Right.
was doing, as long as I wasn't, in the way, of them going either direction. Most very, friendly, at least a wave, if not, verbal communication. And his tone was a little off.
Yeah.
So at first I just kind of brushed it off and just said, you know what, maybe he's a security, guard or official for, there was a small, like, little kind of beachfront, like motel, seasonal thing there. So I said, you know what, maybe because I'm walking around, and he's, like, they see that I'm taking pictures, they think, I'm some kind of inspector or something, so they're just trying to, flush me out. So I just said, no, it's okay. I'm just, just taking some pictures, I believe I might have even said, of the wildlife or the birds or something. And then I just, and very nicely, but I just dismissed him, and I just turned back and just started walking forward again. Probably about 10 or 15 feet. So he then moved his vehicle up to be parallel with me again. And, his tone changed, and he said, what are you doing? I'm not done talking to you yet.
Wow.
And with a very distinctive accent, which I also, you're making me remember now, I forgot to mention before that you had mentioned, to be careful, and that you had actually felt that the people that would be watching this area may have had a specific, let's say, geographical accent. I'll just
Yes.
leave it at that,
Yes.
not to pigeonhole anybody. And everyone can surmise what I'm saying. But so back to this this time. So when he said that, his accent was very pronounced because his voice was very curt. And immediately, before I even, turned back to face him, I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck, and I remembered what you had said about this specific geographical accent. And again, let's say 30 years later, everything is, it's subconscious. I just, I remember that I turned, I went into what, in police or military, we would call a bladed position, where I'm standing slightly sideways, and my demeanor immediately changed, and I went into more of a, just to let him know that, I'm not, I'm not your next, or pushover or your next victim. So I basically, told him that what I was doing was none of his business. I'll spare everyone the language that I used at that time, which was necessary, which I felt was necessary, just to drive home my point. And I basically just said, wrong guy,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not going to back down. So, and at that moment, he I saw the driver's door of his SUV start to open.
Oh my
And
God.
I guess in police talk,
Mm-hmm.
I saw his right shoulder dip.
Oh no.
As he's opening the door with his left arm and turning his body to exit his truck, I saw his right shoulder dip, which to me would be possibly consistent with reaching for something that's underneath the front seat of the car,
Mm-hmm.
or possibly when he's going to step down, it's going to be in the pocket of the door
Mm-hmm.
itself. But he was positioning himself to reach for something. So um, I'm generally armed,
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
and I, immediately made a motion where, I was wearing, probably khaki pants and a golf shirt. So I moved I moved my shirt up away from my holster, which would be on the right side, where I holster a 9mm handgun. So I moved my shirt, which would expose the
Mm-hmm.
holster and the top part of the gun, and I firmly put my hand onto it, which would be the move right before I was possibly going to remove it from the holster in
Mm-hmm.
order to use it or protect myself. So I did that very deliberately and overtly,
Mm-hmm.
because in my experience in the past, even as a police detective, sometimes when you can avoid a confrontation by making these overt motions, and then the person second guesses and then
Mm-hmm.
decides not to go any further. So thank God in this situation, that's exactly what happened.
Right.
He stopped his motion forward, and then where his hand was inside the door, he moved his left hand outside the door and pulled it closed,
Mm-hmm.
but never broke eye contact with me. And
Wow.
then slowly started to roll forward. And then, another advantage that I had was the road was very narrow,
Mm-hmm.
and it was probably about a quarter of a mile further before there was an area where it was wide enough where he could do a U-turn to come back.
Oh,
So he was
okay.
basically trapped in a one-way unless he was going to get out of his vehicle. So there was a slight bend in the road. So once
Mm-hmm.
he moved to where I couldn't see him, I knew he couldn't see me, and then
Mm-hmm.
I made my way back to where I had parked, which was off site.
Yeah,
And
smart.
then and then I positioned myself so that when he came out, I could follow him, I could
Mm-hmm.
obtain his license plate, and then identify him subsequently after that. But
Right.
the most important part here is my immediate subconscious reaction,
Mm-hmm.
I believe, was so far in advance because of what you had said to me,
Mm-hmm. Right.
that allowed me to, for lack of a better phrase, get the jump on him
Mm-hmm.
before he was able to move toward me. And it would have been a 50-50 possible confrontation at that point,
Right. Right.
which nobody would ever want.
No. No, it's
So
incredible. Thank you for retelling that story. It's interesting because we haven't talked about that in a very long time. It's really interesting because I don't work the way that other mediums work or psychics work, where you call them up and you pay them money. And then I've always known that was not something I was supposed to do. I'm not supposed to hang a shingle, in a
yeah,
way. It is very much, they come to me, I pass the messages. Most of them are children who have been murdered by predators or have died suddenly. So it was really interesting because I do remember feeling that intense fear and getting that message from him that said, if you aren't on the lookout, you could be like me. You could end up like me. And that was, that was really scary to get that. And then I was nervous because we didn't know each other well to pass that information. So I'm really glad that you took that to heart and that it helped your subconscious reaction to what was happening. It kind of pulled it all together.
yeah.
Can you speak to what happened with the horses thing
Oh,
that I was
yes,
talking
yes,
about?
yes. So when I made my way back to my car, to then position myself, more of like to get ready to actually do counter surveillance on him. Um, I When I first got in my car, I realized that I wasn't in the optimum position that I wanted to be, and I had spotted where I wanted to be. So I quickly, just threw my stuff into the car, backed up, and then, made my move. And when I entered where I needed to be, I needed to make a quick U-turn, to face in the right direction. And it was an odd angle, and actually facing a direction that I, had never. I had done some superficial, drive-bys in this area and things, while I was just kind of putting the information together, before making, the choice that I spoke about earlier, where I needed to go there and just spend as much time as necessary just to kind of, fully, vet this out.
Right.
So, but even with those trips, I had never, caused myself to be in this, like odd angled position. So
Right.
as soon as I as soon as I came to rest and stopped, put my car in park and turned it off, and reclined my seat a little bit so I would be inconspicuous as he came by me, I glanced through the front windshield, and there's a sign that says, XYZ Horse Farm boarding and training. And I literally just laughed out loud in the car because I just couldn't believe. I mean, and again, it's just such a validation. So when the individual came out, I was able to follow him. Ended up being very brief. He only went, about a mile or two, and then he pulled into a local pub. I, did what I do. I got his license plate, made some other notes, and then basically just left the area. But I think most importantly, so as that time, or during that time while I was sitting, in my car after reading the horse sign, um, and then recovering from seeing that, and then following him, there's always that, the adrenaline rush. And then as you're coming, back down, and kind of, diffusing that, and then really mulling it over, I mean, and fortunately, more times than I can count, in the NYPD, when, the situations happen, you react, and thank God they turn out well. And then, just in retrospect, you kind of play the way scenarios could have went in the other direction,
Right.
and you really get a real sense of your own mortality, and how fragile it is, that if you, hypothetically made a right instead of a left,
Yes.
the outcome could have been tremendously different. So, with that in mind, as I'm, kind of, de-escalating, the adrenaline is going back to, a normal level. It was still, in my mind, was still racing at 1,000 miles an hour, because I was processing everything that you had told me, and realizing that my reaction was so much more in advance than it possibly would have been, and the outcome could have been very, very different. That I just remember, I immediately, once I got to where, I was, going to be on the highway for a while, I immediately called you. So probably within 5 minutes of, breaking off from following him. And I just called you because I couldn't wait just to say, "Oh my God, oh my God, I can't believe what happened." And I mean, you can see, hopefully I'm not boring, but I'm not, like an overly animated person, that acts like that, for no reason at all. But I was beside myself, and I remember even, being emotional, like
Yes.
overcome, with an emotion of, like, oh my God,
Yeah.
like that literally, and I say it with no shame, you saved my life.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. That makes me tear up. I, of course, I'm just was flying by the seat of my pants, right? I was still kind of new to all the mediumship stuff, but I do remember that day you called, and I can see where I was standing in the living room, and I just remember you saying, "You're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this,"
Yeah.
and just feeling just overwhelming gratefulness, that I was also guided to help work on this. And so relieved. I mean, how terrifying, so terrifying, for you to be in that position. And then it's just amazing. It still blows my mind. I don't think I'll ever get used to how the universe works, how all of this works. I'm constantly in awe.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, as I alluded to before, I mean, a lot of my career in the NYPD, I worked, kind of high intensity undercover,
Mhm.
gun, gun apprehension, pattern identification, things of that nature, where, that you're going to be engaging. I mean, like,
Mhm.
it's the offensive defensive line in football,
Right.
and when you get out of the car, somebody said hike, because you're
Yeah.
you're engaging. It's there's
Right.
going to be physical confrontations, and that going in, and that was one of the few times since I had retired,
Mhm.
because a lot, just by the nature of the business, we're doing a lot of responsive things. It's not
Right.
proactive, it's reactive.
Mhm.
And I can generally control my environments,
Mhm.
you know by just being smart and advanced planning. And this was just so reticent of what I had done on the police department, where
Right.
you're just put in a position where it's a direct confrontation with an aggressive individual who's more
Mhm.
than capable of hurting you or killing
Right.
you. There
Right.
was no doubt in me looking at him and him looking at me. He had one intention.
Wow.
That was it.
Wow. I can't even, again, here I am, a furniture CEO, right? Who happens to have this gift that can be the telephone between, the afterlife. But I can't imagine being in that position um, for most of your career. That's just unbelievable. And thank you. Thank you for doing
I just
that.
have one last thing to say
Yes.
as far as
Yes.
with validation. So
Uh-huh.
in several other instances, with
Mm-hmm.
unrelated, with other interactions with other mediums,
Mm-hmm.
they have, in an unrelated fashion, in talking about past things that
Mm-hmm.
that I've been involved in, where this individual may come through,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know them and they don't know
Mm-hmm.
you,
Right.
at all. I mean, I could just say you're geographically disconnected, and
Right.
there's no other connection. Um, Several of them have actually said his name, and the
Mhm,
fact that at that moment
mhm,
that I had to take a brief reprieve from continuing that investigation,
mhm.
because I was in mortal danger.
Yeah,
And I mean, exactly what
yeah.
had happened, which you had warned against,
Mhm,
that it was going to happen.
mhm,
So in post time and in retrospect, three other mediums unrelated to each other have all come back with that from the individual, telling them
mhm.
that that was part of the case when
Right.
we have, because immediately following that, just as a safety issue, I just took a
Right.
little bit of a pause,
Right.
and then so about 3 months later went back,
Mhm.
with additional information, and then ended up being able to close the case, where
Yes.
the state of New York has actually accepted
Mhm,
my investigative results and
mhm.
hypothesis, above the like the local municipality police departments
Great.
conclusion, and actually closed the estate,
Great.
um, and allowed the now widow, to collect life insurance and
Right.
union benefits and pensions, stuff like that, that she was denied for possibly 7 years.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, thank goodness. No wonder he was so, strong and coming through to me and to other mediums. Two things I do remember very clearly. saying, I do remember when you called me on the phone after you left that scene, I just couldn't believe it, first of all. But then I also just kept saying, no, you have to step back. Like, you have to step off now for a little while. Like, you have to,
Yeah.
you have to take a breather. And that was great because it jives with everything that you've thought. But in terms of, the fact that this case and the closure of this case actually helped her, he was trying to help his family.
Yes.
That's it. He was coming through to me and to others to help his family. And thank goodness you were the detective involved and that you volunteered to help work on that case. So,
Well, I always feel blessed, when cases come to me that way, I always feel blessed that, that I was, say, chosen to
yes.
be the one to help.
Absolutely. No, there's a much bigger plan, here. And I think that's a good segue into, what we're working on now. It was interesting because we knew even back then that we were going to work on something bigger.
Yes.
Big, much bigger. And it wasn't I knew it wasn't the nonprofit that I was running at the time, and that I have since closed. So if we, fast forward to literally a week before my book deal happened, a week before, you called me and you said, Kiersten, it's time. Let's do this. And you asked, would you want to be a part of this? You're the first person I'm calling, and I'd like to start this nonprofit called the National Institute for Law and Justice. And I want to help families like the family we mentioned, who typically, when a case goes cold, they then have to out of pocket pay for private investigative services. Now, you have done a lot of pro bono in your life. That's all I do.
Yes.
Since I'm not a paid medium.
Yes.
And, we've been working on this stuff for 8 years together. And, your entire network, like, you've been doing this for a very long time. So the nonprofit itself is really, we're taking it from victim funded to organizationally funded, where we can get donations to help these families so they don't have to, reach into their own pockets to try and get justice and closure.
Yes, that's a perfect description of it. Where we're taking it where, we're doing it on, almost in an individual basis because of, financial restrictions. The case that we just discussed, I did that entire case pro bono.
Yeah.
Funding that through, other work that I was doing, as I said,
Right.
a good example of that would be, I planned the day that I was going to be, in this area around me having another case
Right.
in that vicinity, because then I knew that, financially I was paying my bills, taking care of my family, and then being able to do this on what equated to my own time after I had, like, say, my billable for the
Right.
day, so to
Right.
speak.
Right.
But I think your description is perfect. So where we're doing things for individuals, which is always, it always is at the individual level, but it's one of those things where you kind of scratch your head and you say, well, if we can create this, the ability to do this, or this formulary that we've come up with, where we're liaisoning, nationwide, then why wouldn't we want to do it for 5 families simultaneously,
Right.
10, 20,
Right.
100? And you carefully, we've created the foundation, and we know how to do it now. We have the formulary, and to replicate that is let's say, it's not the easy part, but it's the easier part than actually figuring out how to do it. But then you come to where, there's only so many things that you can individually, there's only so many hours in a day.
Yes.
There's only so many hours that you have in your own day. In order to replicate that, it needs to be on a grander scale.
Yes, I am so excited about this because, I want to go back also to the phone call, because the minute you started talking and saying it's time, I had chills from head to toe. And, I get that it's an intuitive hit for me, that this is exactly what we had been talking about years ago, that we were going to be a part of something much bigger. And it's really, really amazing also from the mediumship side to see all of the kids and all of the people that are coming in spirit form and they're lining up. They're literally lining up for me, for other mediums that are involved with NILJ. You know, it's incredible. It's really, you know, we're in the infancy stage of NILJ. We're literally just about to launch it officially, which is really exciting. I think in September, right? And we are going to be doing our first fundraiser in October, because we feel that this is such an important thing to do for humanity, for these families, for you know, for us personally. I know that you know, this is your heart, this is your baby.
Yes.
And I couldn't be more honored to be working with you.
And the feeling is 100% mutual. As you had said, you know, I'm a conjurer, you know, like
Yeah.
I mull and I mull and I mull, and then you know, and then, you know, when I'm convinced, then I say, okay, I'll move forward this one step. And then, you know, so, you know, not overly cautious, but definitely, you know, a level of caution. And when I felt like I had, you know, kind of, you know, figured out some of the initial nuts and bolts, and you know, and things of that nature, you know, then I said, you know, my first call is Kiersten, because that's my co-founder. Because as you said, you know, we just knew, you know, even being 2,000 miles apart, you know, like consistently,
Right.
except one time, you know, there was just that, you know, like that like different kind of a connection there, knowing that we were, you know, two parallel lines, and meant to, you know, meant to take this on together.
I agree. So let's talk about that in terms of, you know, what's coming next for NILJ. I know that you have been able to, you have a vast network of detectives, and all different types of detectives, crime scene investigators, DNA specialists, cold case investigators that have already said, I want in, I'm coming on board, I want to help. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So, and again, you know, it's not, you know, like the National Institute for Justice, you know, activities or mission is not a new activity. We're just attempting to bring it to a much larger, you know, group, nationally. And with the networks, you know, as I said before, you know, I'm doing that now. So, you know, I'm investigating multiple states, you know, single cases, that have, you know, have come to me again through that exhaustive vetting. And then I've, you know, agreed to, you know, to engage in the investigation, and been able to create through, you know, many, very, very highly vetted investigator, national organizations, other liaisons directly with law enforcement, and then, you know, a lot of retired individuals, as you mentioned, you know, so we have access to, you know, dog teams, you know, aerial search teams, you know, other search and rescue, scuba, all facets of forensics. You know, and many of our, you know, associates work for police departments. Some have actually worked for, you know, like, you know, their local city, district attorney's offices, you know, both at this, you know, state, county, city, federal levels, you know, and when necessary, and you know, depending on the geographical area, we're able to engage and bring them in. You know, and our goal is, you know, because of, you know, I guess, you know, past and current, you know, prohibitions and other parameters, whether it's fiscal, staffing, you know, or even, you know, jurisdictional, you know, conflicts and lack of cooperations, you know, some or a lot of investigations dead end or fall by the wayside, you know, and things of that nature. So that's where we pick up. You know, we pick up where, things left off, or in some cases, may not have ever been done.
Right. Exactly. No, I couldn't be more excited to be a part of this organization. And I think it's pretty incredible too, the three missions that came to you very clearly. The three missions that are under NILJ, which are to work on cases of missing persons in general, also homicide cases. And then lastly, missing and murdered Indigenous women and children. We've got some amazing people that are on board with NILJ already
Yes.
who are also Indigenous. So I'm really excited to see how we can help on all fronts. And I love that those three initiatives were very clear for you.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just it's a terrible, I guess approaching a phenomenon now where, or epidemic levels, and it's almost falling in the, nameless, faceless, the category which should never ever be any human being's fate.
No, it shouldn't.
And then,
well,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, thank God for people like you. Honestly, thank goodness. There are people out there like you, and I don't know very many. I am just, I'm pretty in awe of what you have decided to do in your retirement. I mean, this is incredible. Like, obviously you're still working and you're working on, have been working on cases forever, but
Yes.
You're retired. You could be going off living, on some beach somewhere. And yet that's not what you want to do.
It's too boring. It's too boring. So weekends and 2 weeks of vacation a year are for.
I love it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, I'm excited to, like I said, we're just getting this started. We're going to be launching it officially in the press in the coming weeks, actually. My book comes out on September 20th. I believe we'll be launching it prior to that. And then we'll be starting a big fundraiser. I know, me too. And if you are listening and you're from Flagstaff or you're watching this, Mark will be at the Flagstaff book launch event. And we're going to be talking about all of this type of thing together. So it's going to be
watch. You're probably scaring people away by telling them they were going and now they can't.
Now they're like, nah, let's just not go because of that guy. Well, I can't thank you enough for spending this time. Is there anything else that I've missed that you wanted to share?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I mean, I was going to mention though, but I am really looking forward to, having the honor of standing next to you at your launch.
We're both going to be crying. You know that, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's it. I'm bringing in another suitcase that just has Kleenex in it. Don't worry.
I love that. No, I know. I'm already trying to prep myself for that because I think it'll just be extremely emotional. This is you've been a big part of my life and a very important part and partner, and I'm just really grateful. Thank you for everything that you've done for me as well.
Oh, the feeling couldn't be more mutual, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go ahead and sign off. If you want more information on NILJ, as we call it, or our friends lovingly call it the Justice League, you can go to nilj.org. And if you want more information on my upcoming memoir called Little Voices, that you can find that at kierstenhathcock.com. So I'll have all that information. But thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate it.
A pleasure is mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What if there really is life after death? This was a question I never really pondered. That is, until the year I turned 36. I didn't go looking for the answer. The afterlife simply found me.